Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Roy Osing. He took a startup internet company to a billion in annual sales. Yeah, that's billion with a B. He's got over 40 years' experience as an entrepreneur. He's an author, blogger, content marketer, and mentor to young professionals, startup CEOs. I'm super excited about this because I know with an amazing track record like that, we can all learn some valuable tips. So, with that, welcome, Roy, and thanks a lot for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure, Brett. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, I obviously have a bunch of questions that I do want to ask, but I do want to start off with your background a little bit. Can you share with us about your beginnings, how everything started and how you got started in entrepreneurship to begin with?
Well, we didn't, I mean, I didn't put a name to it. I mean, quite frankly, I got out of university with a math degree. And of course, I have not solved a business problem using a differential equation in my whole life. But nevertheless, I had a math degree. And like most young people, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I got a job with a telephone company here in British Columbia. And not because I wanted to get in the telephone company business, but because it was a job that my father-in-law suggested I take to get going. And so I went to work as a systems analyst, right, in the IT shop at that time. And I just kind of like got interested in the business aspect of the company, and it intrigued me. And it had occurred to me very, very early on that like the whole business was morphing right into a competitive scene. And it occurred to me that we weren't ready for it. And it just led me into exploring things like be different or be dead, differentiation, and all that kind of stuff. And to be honest with you, I basically strategically meandered around the organization and up, and was eventually asked to take over or lead this new business. When the internet finally came in, and I was asked if I could take this on and hopefully grow it, take advantage of the potential that was there. And yeah, so that's what I did. So I'm kind of like this utility dude who just kind of like followed where the opportunities were, but always applying that one concept, which is looking for ways to be different in a way that made sense to people. Like, it's not a narcissistic view here. It's being different in a way that serves other people. And of course, that's the gist of marketing, and that's my love too as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a really important distinction. Sometimes people get the idea that I got to do something different, so they wear a cow costume or something. It's not about just being zany. It's about doing it in a way that aligns with what customers want. But the other thing I find really fascinating about your background is, you're sort of the accidental entrepreneur approach. A lot of people find their passion and then they say, okay, I'm going to chase that, or, I want to make my own hours. So that's why I'm going to go into business. And it's a much smaller percentage that I find of entrepreneurs that I talk to that actually sort of discovered it the way that you did. And I think there's definitely benefits. I mean, to both sides of it, but it's an interesting path. Just as a funny sort of corollary, my father was actually a systems analyst at an insurance company for for years. He
Yeah.
he was not terribly ambitious. He just wanted a decent life for us and the family and everything. And so he loved the guys that he worked with there, and it was one of those things where he got in there and he wasn't a really strong IT guy, but he knew enough to be dangerous. So as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, it brings back memories for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I know one of your big beliefs is, be different or be dead, right? So where did that come from exactly? And share with us what that means. I mean, we've touched on it a little bit.
Yeah. So it literally is about differentiation, because my observation is that organizations and people don't do a very good job of it. Okay, like all you got to do is look around and see the amount of what I call claptrap that's being expressed out there. Now, claptrap is like, we are number one, we're the best, we're market leader, as a way to describe why people should buy from you. Well, the reality is it's all bullshit, quite frankly, Brett. It is. It doesn't mean anything other than to the person expressing it. And that's where the narcissism comes from, right? So it's either claptrap or aspirational. Like we're in business to save the home planet. Okay, good for you. But that's not a reason I'm necessarily going to buy from you instead of your competitor. And so there's a lot of this sort of stuff. And so I work my way through that with my own solution, okay, which is what I call the only statement. In other words, instead of trying to be better or best, you need to be the only one that does what you do. Now, when I say that, it's to satisfy what people crave. Like, I'm not a needs dude either. Like, everybody's looking for what customers need. No, they basically have what they need. Okay, and that space is so competitive anyways. It's price sensitive, right? The margins suck. And so what you want to do is you want to find out what Brett craves. And what I'm going to do is provide that satisfaction to your craving in a way that nobody else does. And I'm going to charge you premium prices because it's basically an emotional, it's an emotional state that you're in there. And so I've been playing with this literally for a long time, and it occurred to me that the be different or be dead tag sort of came out one day. I was sort of thinking about this. Say, look, at the ultimate consequence of not being different in business is eventually you will die. And all you have to do out there is look at the statistics around new businesses. At least 50% of you will not be here in 36 months. I'm sorry. And the main reason for that, yeah, you have to get the fundamentals of the business right. But if you're trying to practice fundamentals in a space that really defines you as a member of the herd, you're doomed from the very beginning. And so I would get startup CEOs saying, Roy, can you help me get going? And I'd say, all right, how are you different? How's your product and service different? How's your idea different? Okay, how does it satisfy the cravings of your target? Oh, you don't have a target market. Oh, okay, that's interesting. And so basically we look at the value that they're delivering, and I say to them, look, if it's not unique, stop spending money. You have to find your niche. And it's not a niche based on value alone. It's based on differentiated value. And I've noticed this, that everybody stops short of the differentiation. It's like, look at all the textbooks on USPs, okay? What they talk about is you providing what you think you should be providing into the space. And then they stop. Okay, well, that's not going to get you where you need to get to. You need to take that step and say, here's the product I'd like to offer. I think it provides value. And by the way, this is what makes it unique. And I'm the only one that does that. And so let's go that way. And so, the angst I've always had with marketing generally, and I can beat my own profession up because I was a CMO for years and years and years, is that it's lazy. Okay, when you claim narcissistic stuff, when you claim claptrap and aspirations, it's a lazy marketing way out. You need to be the only one that does what you do. And I've created a process to do that, and I work with organizations all the time, and they're amazed because they start out, Brett, saying, I'm not special, Roy. I said, yeah, I think you are. Let's just work on that and discover it together. And so that's the kind of long-winded way of saying my drive is to be different. My drive is to differentiate and help people on that journey because they need it, especially entrepreneurs.
No, absolutely. I love so much of what you said in there because, I have a background in marketing and finance academically. And I know even in school, right, a lot of this stuff, we would study disruptive companies, but the irony is, even the disruptive companies, the focus when we studied them was never on the fact that it wasn't deliberate, right? They found something that worked, so they kept doing it, and it sort of, they accidentally sort of created success there, but they weren't deliberate in the way that they went out to be different. And like you said, everybody's number one, the best, the hottest, the newest, the whatever. It's all these superlatives that ultimately don't really mean anything. And I do think a lot of times it is we're passionate about what we do, or we're in love with our own business instead of our customers. So our focus is, what do we think that makes us better, instead of what is it really the value to the customer. So you mentioned the idea of the narcissistic side of it. Well, I was in an IT company for a couple of years during the dot-com era, and we did IT consulting, and so I was not in a sales role, but the office I was in, we had open East Coast operations, and the office I was in was hiring a new head of sales. So we hired this guy, and the CEO of our company was a Brooklyn kid, born and raised, but lived out in California. So when they got an office in New York, his dream was always to have an office in the Chrysler Building. So that's what he did. He got us an office there. So I'll never forget this. We're on the first sales call. This brand new sales guy comes in. He's pedigreed. He's got a lot of experience. And they said, Brett, will you go with him because you've been with the company a little bit longer? You could just support him or whatever else. So sure. So I go with him in the meeting. The first 10 minutes, I'm not kidding. The first 10 minutes when we sat down with the client, he went on and on about our office in the Chrysler Building. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking at him and I'm like, I'm not in sales. The customer doesn't care. If anything, they're going to say, no wonder your prices are so high. So I'm like interjecting, well, this is what we do with the consultants. So when they come to you to do the work, like, they understand about your business, they're embedded with you. And I'm trying to pitch it in a way where there's benefits to the customer. And I just, it astounded me that this is a guy that has a career in sales. And that was his perspective, is, let me tell you about our cool office.
Well, part of the challenge, okay, is that we have this tag called entrepreneur, okay, that has been defined a million ways by academics, typically, okay? Okay, you mentioned accidental success. Yeah, there are accidents. Okay, but if you really want to trust that you will be the subject or the object of an accident, and that's the way you're going to be successful, you will be joining one of the 50% of the businesses that are dead, okay, within 36 months. We have to shed the notion of entrepreneurialism the way it's defined, in my opinion. Okay, for me, it is a deliberate act. It's an act of discovery. It's not an act of copying. Like it drives me frickin' insane the way people benchmark everything. Let's go find out what best in class is doing. Okay, good for you. You want to be a copycat? And you really think that's going to make you a successful entrepreneur? Okay, there may be some applications of benchmarking from an operational perspective that makes sense, but the problem is people are now using it to create strategy around. You don't get unique strategy by copying best in class. You need to be best in class, and there's a way of getting there. Okay, like I've done the dumbed down the planning process. I can help a business create a strategy, okay, that gets it just about right in an imperfect world in 48 hours. Now, the reason that's important to you entrepreneurs is, first of all, you need a strategy. You need context. You need to understand what it is you want to achieve. But you don't want to spend a lot of money on it, and you don't want to take 6 months doing SWOTs and bots and all that kind of stuff, right? Really, seriously. So I had to create, in our company, going to $1 billion, I had to create my own strategy process. And it can be done relatively quickly using the intellectual property of the people in the room. And we get to the really important part, okay, which isn't the plan at all. It's execution. Right? Execution, leadership, marketing, and service, all that stuff, cleansing the inside, increasing the viscosity of the value delivery system. I know this stuff sounds mundane to you, but that's where the success is. It's not in the strategy. And yet, under this term, entrepreneurialism, there's a freaking formula, Brett, that's being advocated by people that have never been one. Okay? They've never been one. If you ask me, what is a success? The one thing that makes a successful entrepreneur, I will say two things. I will say you need context, okay? You need passion. You need a high tolerance for pain, because yes, pain is indeed a strategic concept, right? So I'm the only one that talks about pain. If you can't handle pain, You're never going to be a successful entrepreneur. I don't care what your passion is. You have to mold that and frame it and work harder and work smarter. And gee, I'm concerned because I don't see a whole lot of that juice out there. I just don't.
Yeah, I agree with you also, and I was going to mention it actually earlier, the copycat element of it. So it's a blessing and a curse, right? On the one hand, we have all this visibility now with everything because everything's online. So you can see what other people's ads are. You can see what people's, numbers are. You can see what their funnels look like. You can see all these various things. And so in a sense, it could be a great learning experience. On the other side of it, what ends up generally happening is people say, okay, well, I see this, it's working for somebody else, so I'll do that too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the two sides of the same coin there. How do you think organizations can do a better job of differentiating themselves?
Well, okay. The solution I created for myself that I use in kind of like dealing with businesses generally is part of my strategic game planning process. So let me just give you the context for this, okay? The
Yeah.
strategy building process that I advocate that worked for me, and again, this is not textbook 101 stuff. This is textbook Roy stuff, okay? Why is that important? Well, we used it to get to 1 billion. So there's the currency, right? You ask yourself 3 questions, and then you'll have your strategy. The first question is, how big do you want to be? That's a question about around growth. Okay, declare top line revenue where you want that in 24 months. So I don't believe in 5-year plans. And all you entrepreneurs out there, forget the 5-year plan. They don't exist because the fourth year never shows up. Okay, 24 months. How big do you want to be? If you're at 1 million, if you're at 0, do you want to be 1 million, 2 million? The reason we start with that is that the declaration, the nature of the goal describes the strategy that you need to get there, right? Whereas most planning processes, they do go through the standard, pedagogy, and they come up with a strategy. Then they ask the question, what are the financial implications? And then they go, I don't like the financial implications. Let's change the assumptions. Can you imagine anything dumber than that? So what I do is get the kids off the street. How big do you want to be? If you want to be 5 million, good. Next question, where are you going to get the money? And I call it, who do you intend to serve? So that's a process of describing the fewest number of customer groups you can, because we have limited resources, to get the how big, okay? And so, one customer group would be Nirvana, probably not going to happen, maybe 2, maybe 3. And so when I'm working with people, the market doesn't exist, okay? Forget the word market. It's how many customer groups, okay, do you have to dazzle to get to your how big? Once we've identified the number of customer groups, we then ask, what do they crave? So that's where the cravings piece comes in. Okay, so we got customer group A. What do they crave? I don't care what they need. Okay, I do not care what they need, because if all you're going to do is provide what they need, you're going to go out of business, because you're going to be so price competitive. But don't forget, you have no economies of scale and scope as an entrepreneur, right? So you have nothing. Okay, you're not going to have an accident. The only accident you're going to have is falling off the curb, okay? That's not going to happen. Okay, bang, third question, and here's where we come to the differentiation piece. Because you can't start out by the differentiation piece, Brett. It's got to be a derivative of a strategic context that you're creating, which is how big, who you're going to serve. It's how you're going to compete and win. We're going to compete and win by being the only ones who. And so this is where we work on the only statement. All right, so it's not all about claiming that you're providing the best customer service. If you believe customer service is something that will satisfy a craving, then we will work on that to figure out how you can be unique in there. And so the only statement, we are the only ones who, is the gist of the differentiation thing. And it's really it's hard to do, because people generally are so caught up in the vortex, okay, of thinking about claptrap and all that other stuff that people, they have a hard time of kind of getting their minds clear and thinking about what they're truly unique at. And sometimes, in order to satisfy the cravings of their target customer groups, we have to reframe their business. Like for example, I worked recently with a company that were in the landscaping business. Okay, well, after the session, we created an only statement around them being in the property development business. Completely reframed how they thought about it, and claiming only status within that kind of redefined business. And when they realized that, they just went, oh my God. I mean, wow, this is pretty cool. They are truly unique. And so now what they're doing is leveraging relationships that they've built and charging premium prices and growing really, really nicely. But the whole key was that small little planning process that I created, within which we worked on the only statement. If you're not prepared to do the only work, you'll never be unique, right? You'll never have any differentiation whatsoever. You'll just be like everybody else, claiming to be the best. And it's all hogwash.
Yeah, well, look, one of the things you mentioned, clarity and simplicity is hard, right? People make the mistake of thinking, I need one statement that defines my business. I'll knock this out in a few minutes and then I'm good to go because I've got my statement. It's the opposite. It takes forever to whittle that down and figure out exactly what it is. But it is that clarity that if then you're going to build upon that, that matters. Because if you've got that in a way where it does differentiate you, now you have something you could build on that nobody could copycat. And you mentioned something too about the business that you're in and how you reframed it. I remember hearing the story about Ray Kroc when he was doing the guest lecture at the business school, and he says, what business are we in? Oh, hamburgers. No. Fast food. No. We're in real estate, right? Because we're not going to make the best burger on the planet. We're not going to make, so we've got to be in a place where every single time we're the most convenient option. That's the reason people are going to come and buy our burgers, and I mean, I see that with convenience store, the pharmacies like Walgreens, CVS, whatever it is, and Dwayne Reed, or I don't know what you have in Canada, but you're not going to pick the place because you're tied to the brand. You're going to pick it because it's right on the corner and it's really convenient to go to. So I think understanding that from the customer's perspective is a real big challenge. And I do think you're right. I think a lot of it stems from sort of a systemic indoctrination in the way that we think about marketing in these, structured senses. And maybe there was a time when that worked because I think decades ago, you had a little bit more control and power as a company. People had limited options. Now the options are unlimited and the free flow of information is unlimited. And so it's really difficult to just be an also ran and be able to be successful for very long. No
Well,
doubt.
that's the accident. Okay, you're trusting that an accident is going to happen. Look at the world of flogging. Okay, is a past world. The world of mass markets. Okay, that claimed homogeneity in the masses. That's yesterday. That doesn't exist now, and yet the profession continues, right, to advocate the same principles. How stupid is that? Okay, we live in a world that we're supposed to be smart enough. I'm sorry, but let's call it like it is, because I want your audience to go, "Oh my God, I need to do something differently." Right? I need to create context that is meaningful in an imperfect world. And that's the other thing I just want to briefly talk about. I mean, academia, and we've all been taught to seek perfection, correct? Okay, well, I got news for you, dudes. It doesn't exist. So you are chasing an illusion. We live in an imperfect world, and yet, right, all the tools that are provided to us are based on perfection seeking. Well, I'm here to tell you, right, that that's not going to get you successful. Okay? It's all based on getting a context around strategically what you want to do, bearing down on execution, being customer focused, okay, looking for ways to be different. Look for ways to be different. In fact, look at after you've listened to this podcast, I challenge you, go out and do something different today in a way that makes sense for somebody else. Okay, you got a buddy, you got a friend, whatever. Go do something different that appeals to what they crave and get a feeling for what that's like, right? And then the day after that, go do two things. And so it's a manifestation of a personal ideology, okay, that we need to get going. We need to move the masses away from pedantics, right, into the space on the right-hand side of, here's my math, distribution curve, right? We need to get people over there, as an expression of individuality and being different, if in fact we're going to move society, if in fact we're going to move the economy. Okay, because it sure as hell isn't going to be, it can't rely on accidental success, right? It just can't. And trust me, there's ways of working through this, but you need to put the textbook down. And if you want to check out my blogs, you guys, I've written so much about putting that frickin' textbook down. Go check them out. And I'm not saying that education is important. It is important, but there is a time to put the textbook down and look at some other ways of achieving success based on practitioners. Oh, I just happen to be a practitioner. So I got some tips that I want to share with you. So come on the journey of being different and be dead. Come on. You can do it.
Absolutely. So for business owners, what do you think the secrets are to scaling a business? So okay, let's say that I've got an idea now, and I've somehow been able to figure out how to make it different, unique, and customer centric. So I'm giving people something that they crave. What do I do then to take that idea and be able to scale that into the business that size that I want to get to, or the scale or scope I want to get to?
Okay. The first thing I would say is don't have a scaling objective. Okay, because that'll lead you down the wrong path. What you need to do is have a philosophy of dealing with customers, okay, and let them help you scale your business. So for me, the simple little thing called retention worked like you wouldn't believe. I do not believe in new customer acquisition, because what it does is it leads to dysfunction. Because what we do is we try to attract these new customers by giving them a special deal and pissing off all the existing loyal customers that you have, okay? So retention focused, letting them lead you to where you need to get to, is a very, very powerful tool. And by the way, it enhances margins. There's nothing more expensive than a new customer acquisition program, because acquisition costs, trust me, I've been in the cellular business, in the internet business, done all that. Look at, and it is really, really expensive. So if you want to grow your business and maintain margins, that's how to do it. The second point I would make is scaling is not about cost. It's about demand. And too many people, right, when you ask that question, will start to talk about the cost side of the equation. Well, I'm sorry, that's the wrong way to do it. What you need to do is create a cost structure built on a revenue stream, right, that is growing. That's the relevance of cost. And the only way you can do that is you've got to figure out how to retain customers, let them be your advocates, okay, and just take care of them, love them to death, right? And by the way, because you mentioned you've got unique value, you're going to premium price those puppies, right? Because this is not a world, scaling is not a world of discounting, and it's not a world of mass marketing from that respect. Okay, so retention, differentiate and retain is what I would say. Okay, and if you focus on that, watch the magic. You'll scale.
Yeah, that's that. I know, just in my experience dealing with a lot of business owners and dealing with the attrition, the churn is a killer for a lot of people. And I know, um, if you're always trying to plug holes in the dam or backfill loss, the other problem that you have is obviously none of those people are going to be evangelists for you either. They aren't going to be talking you up because they weren't satisfied enough to stay. So I can see why there's a lot of value in that, because if you don't lose people, it's far more profitable to keep someone you've already got than it is to try and go and find new people. So you pride yourself in doing audacious things. You wrote the book Audacious Unheard of Ways. Can you give us a sense of what that's all about?
Well, we've sort of been talking about it. I mean, the very fact that we can do a strategy in 48 hours is pretty audacious. And actually to have a proof point that shows that it works, based on the practical side of life and based on execution is pretty audacious. when you look at the execution piece, okay, so if you ask me what's my model to build a billion, okay, there's two pieces to it. One is strategy, which we've been talking about. Okay, but the word is loosen up on that. Loosen up on that. Spend 20% of your time on that, because you're not going to get it right the first time. It's all imperfect. And we've been talking about using the sort of strategic game planning model. But the second piece, which we haven't really drilled down on, is execution. That's where you want to tighten up. So you loosen up on strategy, get it just about right. You want to tighten up on execution and spend 80% of your time on that. And look, at most people don't like doing this. They'd rather fuss with ideas. We're an ideas society. Well, let me tell you something, right? Ideas without follow through and pristine execution get you nothing. Okay, so on the execution side, some of the audacious stuff I didn't realize it was audacious. I just put the name on it, laterally. But stuff that really worked is this whole notion called cleanse the inside. Now, cleanse the inside is kind of like my way of saying we need a value delivery system that has a high level of viscosity. Most people don't talk about processes as being viscous. Well, I do, right? That means the throughput is like flawless, right? So one of the things that you look at is what I call cutting the crap. Okay, you try and get rid of all the crap in your organization that's preventing value from, getting created inside and delivered to the outside. And that's process-related stuff. It's procedures-related stuff. Oh, speaking of procedures, yeah, dumb rules is another concept that is rather audacious. A dumb rule is a rule that makes absolutely no sense to a customer, and yet we all have them, right? And we claim that they're not dumb, but they are dumb. They are so dumb, they're stupid. And all it does, right, if you want to retain customers, right, and you're pissing them off with your rules, well, we sort of know where that's going to end up. So I used to have dumb rules committees in my organization, and I realized my organization eventually got to like 8,000 to 10,000 people. It was not small when I finally walked away from this. By the way, that business today, Brett, is $18 billion a year.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's an aside.
Fantastic.
So we had this thing called killing dumb rules, and we had contests, and frontline people were just absolutely ecstatic about this, because when I said, look, what are the rules and procedures that we have that annoy customers? You better believe that they had lots of input.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a simple little idea. Okay, the president of a company admitting that they were doing stupid things. I mean, can you imagine? Well, you have no idea. I get goosebumps just thinking about this now. I mean, it just lit fires in people for no specific reason other than somebody was listening to them. So the dumb rule piece was audacious. The last one I'll mention, because we could go on, we could talk about yummy incoming and all that kind of stuff. But the last one I'll mention is hiring for goosebumps. Okay, if you want to be audacious, if you want to scale your business, you better have people that have given you goosebumps when they were hired. And by that I mean the human side of enterprise. So what I would do is I would be involved in interviewing probably most of the customer service people, right? And my reasoning was really simple. I got to retain customers. I don't want to have somebody that would rather be writing code talking to my customers. I want people who actually have an innate desire to serve others, right? So I'd get you in a room and we would have a panel interview. President of the company sitting there hiring for a service representative. Man, that was intimidating, I can imagine. But it also told the person how important that job was, right? So I would say, Brett, do you like human beings? And of course, you'd be going, okay, well, yeah, I think I know what answer he's... So you would say, yeah, Roy, I love humans. And I would say, okay, well, tell me a story that would show me and prove to me how much you love human beings. Okay, so I got two responses. One is kind of like the logician and the sort of, the logical person would give me a story that would leave me feeling cold like a fish, right? The other person, right, that really understood it and had liking people running through their veins would tell me a story that was so rich and so passionate, it would leave me with, yes, goosebumps. I would hire that person, and if I had to, teach him the business. Because you can't teach people to like people, and yet that is another key element of success out there to you entrepreneurs. It ain't about the technology wizards you have. You need them, but that's not what's going to get you the business. It's going to be humans talking to humans. It's not going to be FAQ sitting on a website. That only has a certain amount of life. All right? Sooner or later, right, the customer engagement process is going to degenerate into humans talking to humans. So you better have people that really like doing that and were born with a gene. And so that was another one. People thought I was crazy. First of all, they thought I was crazy that I would even be involved in all these interviews. And when I told them what hiring for Goosebumps was all about, they went, okay, now Roy, I know you're going over the deep end. But that was essentially my recruitment strategy, Brett. I want to hire people that gave me goosebumps when they told stories about their relationship with human beings.
I love that.
And that's missing today,
I
by the way. That is missing today. I mean, how many times have you walked into a store, if you ever walk into a store these days, or gone to a website and gone, wow, I mean, this is amazing, and I feel so good about it? Unfortunately,
it's
on the
pretty rare.
website,
Yeah.
everybody's the same. Everybody's the same. And so when I do run into them, I make a point, and my wife gets embarrassed, of course. I make a point of calling the person out and say, you're amazing. You provide the most caring service I've ever felt before. Right? So it's the feelings piece, and they just light up because that's who they are, and that the
Right.
recruitment process has worked, right?
Yeah, no, and I mean that's what drives them. So there's total alignment there, and
Yeah.
I do think there's so much value in that. But I just think I love the approach because it is so out of the box yet it's common sense.
Well,
Why would you put somebody in a role to do something that they don't enjoy doing, even if they're good at it, right? It, you can have a skill in something where you have competence and you can do something. If you don't have the passion behind it, and I'll share a quick passion story with you from my work life before I was an entrepreneur. So I was actually in staffing for a few years when I was younger. And it's basically a sales role. I mean, you're calling clients all the time, and then you're talking to candidates, and you're trying to place people in jobs. Really important work. And I recognized intellectually it was important. I was decent at it because I can talk to people, and I care enough that I. But the day that I realized that staffing wasn't the career for me officially, I came into the office one morning, and the owner was in there, and it was a small company, and she had been late last night. She was in early this morning, and she's brimming with excitement. Oh, I got to tell you about this. So I was talking to this lady last night. She's got this job, and I had to spend 2.5 hours on the phone with her because I've got the job for her. It's going to be such a great career move. Had nothing to do with commissions. Had nothing to do with the money she was going to make. She was so passionate about helping this person make the right decision about her career and was worried she was going to make a mistake with her career. And I said to myself in that moment, subconsciously, I'm not that, and that's my competition. Because if you don't love what you do, somebody else does. And that's who you're competing against. So it isn't just, hey, do you have competence somewhere where you could be okay and get by? If you want to be successful and really good at anything that you're doing, if you don't love it, know that somebody else does, and they get up in the morning excited to wake up because they get to go do it. If you're waking up and you need to pump yourself up to go into the office in the morning, you're going to struggle to be successful at that. I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah, I think the other thing for me is I'll call it strategically defining the job or the role. Like I am such a strategically focused person. Like I can relate action and activity I observe and know whether it's consistent with the strategy or not. And quite often we're quite content to play at the tactical level, right, without relating it to a strategy, right? And that's, of course, that's where dysfunction happens. Okay, like I don't want somebody happy in a job. I want somebody happy in a job that's performing a role that delivers value as determined by the strategy we've all agreed to. Then I'm happy with that. But if all you're doing is being happy, it's like the story of somebody sitting on a beach, right? I got my laptop. I'm sitting on the beach. I'm having a good time. I said, okay, fair enough. What I want to know is while you're on that beach, dude, what are you doing to help the performance of the organization that has created a strategy, right, with some differential advantage claim? That's what I want to know. And so always be looking up to your strategy. Going back to, because we've had a bit of a discussion about this, I find that so-called entrepreneurs don't deal with context. And yet it's the context that makes them successful. All the stuff we've been talking about, creating the strategy, knowing who you're going to serve, doing all that hard work, and then go have fun with it. I don't want you having fun without it, okay? To make it perfectly clear. Because I'm afraid you won't be a successful accident, Brett. You won't. You will be a victim. And that's what's going on today. And it's so simple, so practical. People just need to be guided by conversations like this. All right, like I'm not beating anybody up on this. I'm saying, look there's a way forward, but it's stepping out, right? It's breaking away from what you've been taught. That's kind of what I mean by putting a textbook down, right? It's time to get real. It's time to get serious. It's time to get deliberately successful. So let's call this deliberate success, not accidental success.
I
All
like
right?
that. Yeah. It is scary for people to step out, though. And I think that's one
I
of the
know.
things. They find comfort in patterns and history. So, all right. So, where can people find your products and services? Where can they connect with you?
Well, yeah, you can. I have a home on the internet, and my website is bedifferentorbedead.com. And look, I've been at this a long time. So if you go on there, there's resources. I blog every week about this stuff. Okay, so my blog goes back to 2009. That's how old I am. All right, and I am constantly writing about this whole notion of being different in varying ways because people have different ways of learning. And so my philosophy is I'll keep coming at it, the same subject perhaps, or new subjects in varying ways. So I have a blog there. I have a page on my books. I've written 7 books if you're interested in Be Different or Be Dead, the original version all the way up to the latest version, which was published about 18 months ago, I guess. There's a quiz on my website called the Be Different or Be Dead quiz. And so if you want to figure out where you rank, okay, in terms of the Be Different or Be Dead principles, right, that you and I have been discussing, you can go on there and have some fun. There's a whole bunch of questions. You just rate the extent to which you comply with those on a 1 to 5 scale, and you get an answer. And the idea isn't in the precision of the number, right? It's in the relativity of the
Yeah.
responses. And so then you go in there and you look at maybe the bottom 3 and you decide whether you want. Anyways, have fun with that. I'm trying to make it as robust as possible. Just revised the quiz recently, so it's kind of fun. And look, I also have an email. My email is roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm delighted to have one-on-one conversations with people. I really am. And it's interesting because I get emails, right? Because I do a lot of this, and they'll say, "Hey, Roy, here's my draft only statement. What do you think?" And we have a conversation, and hopefully I'm able to help them, and they go on the journey. And I have an advocate in the Be Different or Be Dead tribe. That's the tribe we want, Brett. We want the Be Different or Be Dead tribe because it's relatively small, so there's not a big risk of everybody being the same when the tribe is small. So come visit me, bedifferentorbedead.com.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And I have one last question that I have to ask because I think it's important. It's always interesting to hear everyone's unique perspective. And that is, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or entrepreneur?
Differentiation. If you're not different, you're dead. You'd be disappointed if I didn't say that because I would be
I
inconsistent.
would, but I we had to make sure there was congruence there, right? We had to hit you
It's
again with that.
it's about differentiation, you guys. Come on. You got to be different in a way that people care about.
Yeah, and I think that's really the hook with it, right? Again, you can put on the cow costume. If there's no extra utility for your customer with that, then it's cute, but it doesn't really add extra value. It doesn't make you stand out other than okay, you're the funny one. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's great advice and certainly appreciate that. So with that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Roy, so much for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Visit BeDifferentOrBeDead.com to learn more about his work. Join him in the Be Different or Be Dead conversation. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want from your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.